With UK4, and you should be in the room. Yeah, I don't know. That's you were asking for a lot. Okay, now we're gonna get fired. Hopefully you're in the room for the mock selection of Graves County, item 1-8103, Kentucky 303. I'm not going to read bios; those are on the app. Fill out your reviews on the app. You'll be registered for all the prizes and all that stuff. You heard all that in the first session. Eric, Pelfrey, Chris Boone, Patrick Perry, Stephen DeWitt, Mark Bryant, Eric Krueger. That's the team. They're going to run through it. I'm not going to eat any more time up. Eric, you've got the ball. Again, bios are online. Run with that.
Yep. Thanks, sir.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. So what we want to do here, I think if a lot of the industry, we did a mock selection several years ago. That was, I think it was an eye opener for a lot of the consultants to understand a little bit more about how we actually perform the selections. So it's been several years, but we felt like we would do a similar refresher on that process. So what we're going to do today, we took this group that's performing this morning. We have a similar group in the afternoon, but these are actually real projects that we selected about 10 months ago. So the first one that we're going to be doing is from our Graves County 1-8103 Kentucky 303 project. So want to let you all know before we get started that every committee that we do is completely different. We always have two members of our user division, which is typically for a highway design job. That's almost always the project manager, unless that project manager is a non-engineer. And then we also have the location engineer from highway design. If it's a different type of job, the user division obviously is different. A lot of our statewide are obviously different. But then we have 6 people on our secretary's pool. 2 of those people are chosen at random. And then we have 3 people on our governor's pool, and 1 of those is chosen at random. So before we get too far along, I want to allow each of the members to introduce themselves. Patrick, you can start.
Yeah. Patrick Perry, Railway Design Branch, Division of Highway Design, and serving on this committee is the user division.
My name is Steve DeWitt. I'm the branch manager of strategic planning, and I was drawn to the secretary's pool for this project.
Chris Coates, District 1 Project Development. I'm the project manager for this project. And I'd also like to know who's already done their review for this presentation and given us 1 star. Gail.
I'm Erica Duray. I'm the alternative delivery program manager, and I was on the secretary's pool for this.
And I'm Mark Bryant, longtime KYTC, former KYTC employee, and currently with the city of Desmond. And I was the brand new selected member on this committee.
Thank you all. Appreciate you all coming here today also. So we kind of want to highlight 3 main things from this process. First, we just want to let you guys know how the qualifications-based selection process goes. Some of you all obviously do work outside of Kentucky. The process in Kentucky is a little bit different. The process here in Kentucky is the full authority with the consultants that are selected rests with these 5 people. That's a little bit unique. Other states that you all work in, usually they have a recommendation that's elevated to the secretary, and the secretary makes the final decision. Secretary here doesn't know about our decision until we let them know. Actually, you all know before they do because you're constantly hitting F5. We also want to make sure that we let you know what is important from them. Obviously, you're only going to be selected if you understand in this case what Mr. Coons and unfortunately Mr. Perry and some of the other people think is important about this job. So if you don't understand how they think, chances are you're not going to have a higher chance of selection. We have different avenues to do that. You have the opportunity to meet with them prior to the advertisement going live, and I would encourage you to continue to do that. And of course, the eventual goal is obviously to give you the tools that you can to enhance your quality submittals in the future. So this is the way that we do these selections now is through MS Teams. We are off, even for those of us that work in central office, we do these meetings over Teams. We're not in the same room. My office is right across from David Gormley. We sit in our offices and rather than going into a conference room. So that's a little bit unique, but in the past, historically, we had to have the members travel into Frankfurt and would have a closed door meeting, and luckily just before COVID, we actually changed that rule. Our legal team said it was okay. So we're gonna get started. If you all have any questions, kind of as we go through this process, let me know. Raise your hand, but otherwise, hopefully we'll have some time at the end of the presentation for questions. But we're gonna go ahead and call our first meeting to order. From my office, Melanie Young typically handles the first meeting. So I will play the part of Melanie for now, call the meeting to order. And today is October 11th of 2021. First order of business committee, would you all like to elect the chairman?
Coons.
Second.
I didn't mean to recount.
Mr. Kentz, would you like to kick off the meeting and do a project overview, please?
Sure, and just to, as much as Steve likes to tease me, it's pretty common for the project manager in the user division to be the committee chair, since we know the most about the project usually. So in the first meeting, we give a project overview. In general, I know a lot about the projects. It's in my district. I've dealt with it through planning and other things, and these guys, it's maybe the first time they've seen it. So Kentucky 303 in Mayfield and Graves County is a very congested north-south road in the city of Mayfield. It has a rural section with a fairly narrow pavement widths with very limited shoulders. There's been a strong desire from the city to improve the road and include some kind of pedestrian or bike facility. The road goes right by One City Park and the YMCA and terminates on the south end. Behind the YMCA, the city's built a trail system to another city park. So building a pedestrian facility along this route would help kind of connect the downtown area, some of the population centers, to those two parks and to the YMCA. The Kentucky 303 intersection with 121 has a pretty severe skew, about 70 to 80 degrees. Causes a lot of traffic congestion with what we have to do with the signal there. And so we're looking at, I'd like to see some different intersection concepts there, whether it be some kind of roundabout or other innovative intersections. I'd like to see some intersection experience, traffic modeling experience in the proposal to try and get some good ideas out of that. As far as the we do so the project right now is state funded. We would like to do enough environmental to at least do some historic and archaeological overviews, maybe a few other things, so that it could be federalized in the future. The park that's on the northern end of the project, we believe it's a 6F. So we want to make sure we have somebody on the team that has some experience with 4F and 6F issues. So we've given these firms alternate names to protect the innocent. So Alabama that did it on a small urban area study on this project, and project also runs close to the new Kentucky 80 bypass, and that project was done by the firm Kentucky. So both of those firms have some experience working in this area. That's the kind of the general overview of the project.
And like during this time, we would just be taking notes. I would be taking notes.
Chris, is there anything specific that you would want all the teams to address in their proposals?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, Eric, is probably the traffic analysis, roundabout intersectional analysis I mentioned earlier. The corridor portion of it is a pretty straightforward project, widening project. Most likely will be curb and gutter and sidewalk, but the intersection is kind of the unique part of this. So I want to make sure we have somebody on our team that has some experience with unique intersections, traffic modeling, things necessary to make that decision.
So Chris, would there be any advantages to the approach of the project from a single firm response versus a multi-team?
Personally, for me, I don't have a preference with teams, consultant teams versus a single firm. the key for me is to have a good project manager that manages the team, whether it's his internal folks or people at another firm. You know, I don't want to call Nick Saban and ask him about an issue for the project and him tell me that it's his sub and I got to call Mark Stoops. You know, I want to be able to call the project manager and say, there's an issue with the archaeology, and him to say, okay, I'll take care of it. And beyond that, it doesn't matter to me whether that's one of his people or somebody that's with another firm.
Chris, how important are the DNA studies versus creative engineering?
So for those of you who don't know, a DNA study is a data needs analysis, usually come out of our division of planning, and I make it a general rule to ignore everything that comes out of the. No, that's my own ad lib. My own ad lib. On a project like this, the DNA study is giving us project information and shouldn't necessarily be used as a tool to give us solutions. But the DNA study, actually, the DNA study is giving us solutions and probably was not a well-done DNA study. So you know, for example, in this project, the issue of the park being a 6F structure, a 6F issue came out of the DNA study. So that was good information to have for the project. We gave that to the consultant, and I would expect if somebody proposed back and didn't mention the 6F issue and ignored it and didn't give us any info how they're going to address it, that would be something that would be, you know, missing the ball. Or to give McHale and DeWitt some credit, you know, for a bigger project that has what I would call a big planning study. If we have a planning study that recommends that the bypass be on the north side of town, and a consultant proposal comes back saying, I think we should build it on the south side of town, it's probably not going to get very much traction. But on a smaller project like this, it's more just to give us concerns and issues with the project.
Chris, which firms came in and met with you prior to the advertisement?
All of the firms that proposed did meet with me and ask me questions about the project.
Have there been any similar projects in this area that tie to this project?
So on the south end of the project, Kentucky 80 new bypass, and we did improve a small section of 303 with that project. And we'd be looking at extending that same typical section. And Kentucky was the firm that did that project.
Chris, how much discussion in the approach would you prefer to see on the pre-quals that listed in the RFP that are more conditional?
I think we should focus. I prefer that we focus on the required services. I know that some of those conditionals may be used in the future, but the required services are what we know is going to be needed. I think that needs to be the focus.
Chris, what about early engineering or these responses? What are you expecting to see or would you like to see in some of these responses as your discussions have progressed with the firms?
So my microphone first. We know that it's a tough spot. I know that a lot of firms are in. You know, it's not a design competition, and it only, you know, it adds to your overhead, adds to your cost to do a lot of design work. But if one firm is going to do it, then everybody feels like they probably have to do it. And in a situation like this, you know we have an intersection that may need some kind of innovative roundabout, innovative approach. So we probably, we want to see things in the proposal that we think are going to have an idea of work. So we understand that's going to require you to do a little bit of engineering, but we certainly don't. We want to see a full preliminary line and grade set of plans and an engineering proposal.
Chris, what component of the proposal do you think is the most important factor?
For me personally, said most of these answers are Chris Kuntz's personal preference. These guys may have other preferences. The other PMs, other districts may have other preferences. I'd like to work with someone I consider is going to be a strong project manager, someone that I know can manage their team, that I can work with directly and interface with, and not have to deal with the other members of their team. For projects that have unique characteristics, for example, if it's a 1,000-foot bridge or a roundabout. I want to see experience in the firm or from one of their subs working on those kind of unique situations. The depth of the team, most firms have people that at their firm that have experience in these things. We don't need to see 5,000 people on the org chart. We need to see the key people that are actually going to be working on it. And then for me, the number one most important thing more than all of that is the capacity that you list, since I know it's 100% truthful and accurate. Right, Taylor?
Are there any more questions or comments from the committee? We'll go ahead and call the first meeting to close then. We'll take a short intermission. Are there any questions from the audience on the first selection meeting? How the process goes? Okay. So typically after the first meeting, then the committee members, they receive all the responses now through our portal. So they have 16 days. The first selection meeting is on a Monday. Final selection meetings are on a Wednesday. So it's 2 weeks and 2 days later. They typically have 16 days to review responses unless there's holidays, things that may interfere with that. But in that time, we have secretary pool members and governance pool members that may be on several committees at the same time. So we typically get maybe 8 or so responses per job. We have had some recently where we've had significantly less, but we also have some that get up in the dozens or 15 or so. So these people are all busy. This is obviously work in addition to their normal daily jobs, but they take this process very seriously. We like to have a little bit of fun through this process, as you can tell, but they do take it very seriously. So they make sure it's a commitment they've made and do their due diligence. So we'll go ahead and now call our second meeting to order. From our office, Melanie Young handles the first selection meetings. Clarissa Hamilton, which I'm sure you all probably know as Reese, handles our second meetings. So this now is October 27th of 2021, and I will be playing the part of Reese. So Reese's not here, unfortunately. I love to tease her in person, but this is the best that I can do today. We received 5 responses for this job. So call the meeting to order. Do you all have any comments that you would like to make before taking the first round of voting?
No, I think we're ready.
Okay. Go ahead and please text me your votes. There'll be 1, 2, 3, of course, and this, just so you all know, we have evaluation factors that are part of every RFP. We don't care about the scores. So we could have people that are very easy graders, quote unquote, that may rank people very high towards the 100th percentile, or others that are harder. But all that we care about is 1, 2, 3, and then it's hopefully a clear 1, 2, 3. So I apologize. I didn't realize that the setup. I don't want to disconnect this because I think that may disconnect the people that are viewing online. But in this process, we typically have an Excel sheet. And I'll show you guys that real quickly here in the room. Hopefully you guys can see it. I'll see here also. So I apologize. I know this is small, but we handle this so the people that, yeah, basically it's that.
So when they sent out the speaker instructions on computers, and you said you had it under control.
Yeah, I forgot about the court. So this is, we just have these alphabetized by firm. So at this point, when the committee texts those votes in, we read these off. So do you all want to go ahead and go through this process, just so you all understand what that's like? So, Stephen, do you want to read these?
Kentucky 1,
Okay.
Alabama 2, Georgia 3. Kentucky 1, Georgia 2, Alabama 3. Kentucky 1, Tennessee 2, Alabama 3. Georgia 1, Kentucky 2, Alabama 2, Tennessee 3. Georgia 1, Kentucky 2, Alabama 3.
Okay, so again, I apologize for not being able to see that, but From the, from the 5 responses, we received votes for 4 of them. So at this point, would the committee like to eliminate the firm that did not receive the vote? Yes.
Yes, and I believe, just to note that was Purdue.
Yeah, so, for y'all that don't know, Mr. DeWitt went to Purdue. So we like to tease him every chance we get also,
Literally every second of the day.
as a fellow planner also. So
I would also move that we eliminate Tennessee, which only received a number 2 and a number 3 vote.
does the committee concur?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that will now leave Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky. So for every product specific job, we eliminate until we get 3 firms. We have to have a top 3 for our selection process. We know that you all don't necessarily care who finishes second, third, but it's historically the way that we've worked. If for some reason we cannot negotiate with the number 1 firm, we move on to number 2. So now that we have a top 3, do you all want to have any discussion before taking the final vote?
Sure. So I really like the approach that Kentucky had in their proposal. I think they had a good main traffic plan, good intersection analysis traffic plan. Looking through their proposal, I think they have some staff that have a lot of experience with the innovative intersections and can do a good job on this. Georgia. No, Alabama did the small urban area study. I know they have some experience with this project. They looked at it back in the planning phase. I think they would do a good job too. Georgia has done a lot of work recently in the district. They've done well with those projects, have a good team, and I think all 3 of them would do a good job for us.
I like seeing that Georgia mentioned in their response, the use of Sidra as a roundabout analysis tool, which is kind of the top of the line for a traffic analysis tool that shows that they know what they're doing for the roundabout.
I liked Kentucky's approach too. I wanted to see what you guys thought about the team that had the co-project managers. How do you guys feel about that in the org chart?
You know, it's obvious a bit of a concern. You know, they can kind of be a catch-22 experience of how do you get experience as a project manager if you can't be a project manager, and then if you don't have any experience as a project manager and propose as a project manager, then you may not get picked. So it would be you know, it would have to be the right fit. If it was a situation like this where you have one of the co-project managers is very experienced, the other maybe it's not, then I think we could make it work, but it might make things, you know, it does give me a little bit of concern, but I think we can make it work knowing the individuals involved.
Chris, what did you think about Georgia's org chart? I think they listed every single person that's ever worked at the firm, and but it's a $300,000 design job.
Well, as I said before, you know I appreciate you know, wanting to see who's doing what on the org chart, but I think the focus needs to be on the key personnel that are doing the tasks that are, you know, the prerequisites, what's being asked for the project. You know, I don't need to see 10 roadway designers. I want to see the 2 or 3 that are actually going to be doing the bulk of the work.
So Chris, you mentioned capacity there a moment ago. Chris, you mentioned capacity a moment ago, or at least in the first meeting, I should say. Are there any issues regarding capacity for any of the remaining firms?
Not to my knowledge. Eric, I don't know if you were going to speak any to capacity, or if you want us to say anything.
Yeah, that's typically the way that we schedule our final selection meetings is we have the highest dollar amount project specific job first in the morning. We stagger those sequentially then to the lesser jobs. The goal, of course, is we don't want the industry winning a lesser job and then potentially being kicked out of the running based on capacity of future jobs that are later in the day that may have a higher dollar amount. Same with statewide. Typically, statewide don't obviously have an aggressive schedule because most of those are upset limit jobs where we do individual assignments. So capacity is not typically affected there, but we do look at when the capacity section comes up. We look at the overall capacity. We understand that there's a little bit of gamesmanship that goes on your side, but what we try to focus on is not necessarily making sure that the same firm doesn't win multiple jobs, but more often than not, we don't want to have the same project manager or see some similar key components of that project team, knowing that they're going to be probably working on very tight schedules, maybe on the same jobs within the same month. And I'll ask from our seat, since Mr. Gormley is not here, Chris and others that may be working with any of these firms that remain, have any of these consultants been difficult to negotiate with or work with as projects kind of continue on and evolve?
No, they've actually been, all three of these finalists have been very good to deal with. I've not ever had any issues with negotiations.
Great. Okay. Are there any more comments, questions from the committee?
One thing I do want to say, I liked in Kentucky's response that they told more of their story with pictures rather than words on what how the project was going to go. I think on this month I had approximately 18 proposals to read, and so they were able to convey the information that they wanted me to know, as opposed to me having to find it in a paragraph.
What you're saying is the Purdue grad needs pictures. And all.
Absolutely.
The Purdue grad is also a planner. Yeah. Okay, if you all don't have any more comments or questions, go ahead and text me your votes. And again, I apologize for not having the computer up and going, but the way that these came in, Kentucky ended up finishing number one on 4 different people and number 2 on 1. Georgia finished second with a number 1 vote, 2 number 2 votes, and 2 number 3 votes. And then Alabama received 2 number 2 votes and 3 number 3 votes. So it's not unanimous. We obviously don't require a unanimous selection, and it's rarely unanimous. But as long as the committee, and especially Mr. Coons in this case, can work with that firm and the project manager, we obviously move forward. We then push out a selection report to the industry. We also send an email, now actually goes through our portal. So if any member of the firms that's registered as a user in the portal as a system admin, you all receive that notification at the end of the day. Once we're finished with all the selections, we push out a notification that lets you all know. Unfortunately, that's probably a notice letting you know that you didn't get a call, you're unsuccessful. Because otherwise, Mr. Coons would have called, in this case, Kentucky, to set up a freeze-on meeting and get the project going. So we have 12 minutes.
Eric, if you remember, actually, in this case, we had tie between 2 and 3.
That we had to break
The
through.
original,
Oh, yeah,
in
we
the
did.
real world, when we did this, we had a tie between
Yeah.
2 and 3 and re-voted, I think 4 times before we finally broke that tie.
People kept
But-
changing them every.
But as Eric said, we did have a discussion about that. We wanted to make sure we got that part right, because if for some reason things didn't work out with number 1, we could have a tie at number 2. We had to have a clear number 2, and it took 4 rounds of voting to get there.
Yeah, it's part of the process, so. I guess while we're waiting on potential questions, the process is a little bit different for statewide contracts. The process is the same, but actually 2 good examples of statewide contract managers. Mr. DeWitt is our statewide planning coordinator, and Mr. Perry is our statewide highway design, roadway design contract manager. So in Stephen's case, he has 3 consultants that are on. Patrick, you currently have 6. So, and actually Patrick's getting ready to re-advertise his because he's been very popular. And we've been doing, obviously, as you all know, quite a bit more work. So we're actually going to re-advertise his prior to the 2-year cycle. But in the case of, let's just say Stephen, where we have 3 firms that we pick, we go through the same process, but instead of having a top 3, we go through a top 5. So of course, we end up selecting the top 3 from those. And then in that case, number 4 overall would be number 2, number 5 overall would be number 3. Again, that may give you all an idea as to how close you are for maybe future selections, or if you want to request a debrief, maybe see what you've done that may help you in the future. Any questions from the audience? I'm not checking the online. Okay, can you see that?
I can, there's no questions. I can go back.
Oh, yeah.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, Vanessa, thank you. The question was, is the portal email that I mentioned, is that already happening? Yes, that is. It's happening. I think it's been happening since we came out with the portal 3 years ago. But again, if you're not listed as a system admin, it wouldn't be pushed to you. We don't want to send it to everybody that's set up in the portal. We figure that your principal or your principal in charge, your high level people, they would probably want to know. So I'm sure in your case, Greg is on that. But if you want it to be added, I'm sure that we can add that on a case by case basis also.
You want to let them know that our sentence got extended for another year?
Yes, on to further talking points if there were no questions. So, for those of you that may not have heard, Stephen said, do you want to let them know that your sentence got extended? And yes, I tease these people, but even Stephen, these people have done an excellent job for us. We have fun again, but they are all busy people. Not just these people, but everybody. We have 5 people on Secretary's Pool that will be continuing. We now are bringing in Amanda Desmond to take over for David Erickson. And then all 3 people on our governor's pool. So Mr. Bryant, Cindy Evanston, and Bruce Scott will be here this afternoon. Those people are also continuing for an additional year at the request of the governor's office. Yeah, so now they will stay on for better or worse in your all's case until September 1st of next year. So this will be, Mike, I see you back there. This will be our first time in industry that we've had people on this pool for more than 2 years, which honestly, I think it works well for us. I know that you guys are busy, but you guys all, I think, value the process. And I think from talking with people that have served in that capacity in the past, I think you'll get a lot of you educate yourselves about the cabinet. Obviously, it makes you unfortunately more attractive to the consultant industry, but there's a lot of lessons learned throughout that process. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, well, I'll mention 2 other things quickly. DB goals on RFPs, you all may have seen that the language has changed a little bit. We used to have we had a section for the DBE plan, and the language there was a little bit confusing. We've now changed that to DBE goal. And instead of it being a shall, thank you to Mr. Andre, it is now a may. So if you see that language on the DBE goal is that the consultant team may include a DBE, and if there are no evaluation points in that evaluation section, typically that happens on state funded jobs. Where there may not be a long list of DBE firms that have pre-quals. We don't think it's fair for the industry to be forced to partner with DBE firms in those cases. So it's a little confusing, but it's not actually a true requirement if there are no evaluation points.
And then my projects, and I always include it and always put it in the factors, even if it's state funded.
Absolutely, and it's a good point to make, Stephen. So Stephen said that the project manager always has final say. I can give what I think. It's just my perspective, but if you all don't know me well, I'm often incorrect. So Stephen can make the decision, asking any project manager to say, well, even though it's not a requirement, I really want to see DBs. And I know Stephen values the DB program, and we're fortunate to have people that see the value and don't make it too difficult on the industry also to meet our goals. And then the last thing I'll mention, a lot of times we get questions about, hey, how is my firm doing? Can you guys give a report on historic evaluations? You can always let us know, professional services or Patrick Perry and his people in highway design. They can provide a 10-year report. I'll encourage you, if you're not submitting evals within the similar projects section on your responses, make sure that you try to get a score. I know sometimes it's hard to ask in this case, maybe Mr. Coon say, give me an evaluation. If you feel like you're pressing him too much, he may give you a bad evaluation. So it's a delicate subject, I understand, but I think it's of value because when they're looking at these, they say, well, if this firm's done well in the past, they can obviously do well now. Okay, I think I'm getting the wrap it up, 5 minutes, and I don't see any more questions.
Yeah, nothing at all, guys.
Okay.
Oh, no. I regret my decision.
Yes, Andre.
Oh.
Yes, the question was, is there a time limit on requesting a debrief? Not sure why you're asking that actually, but that is an excellent question. We always have a time limit with you, but a email, I take those requests via email. It's the easiest way to track things for several reasons, but the request has to come to me within 30 days of the final selection meeting. And historically, we waited until we selected and negotiated with the top firm. We no longer do that. These, as I mentioned, these people are all very busy. We've got a lot of stuff going on. If sometimes we try to obviously negotiate what we can, but sometimes that may not happen for 4 to 6 months. In that time, they may have served on 20 other committees and they don't even remember that job. So now we basically say, we selected Acme Engineering. We're going to go ahead and fill this debrief request from this other firm. And we do that as soon as we can. I was going to give it a drink ticket for any questions, but I'll have to get you, Vanessa. I'm not giving Andre one.
We have vague canned questions.
Yeah.
They do row.
All right.
Yeah, 4 minutes, but.
Yeah, if anybody wants to, Mr. Choate.
I'm curious.
Oh, wait,
hold on. Briefings do y'all average a year?
Well, since you made the new one, that
Yeah,
the marketing, yeah.
yeah. The question was how many debriefings do we get in a year? They are a lot more popular now. And I don't want to speak for the committee, but if you all feel differently, please state. Again, they're busy, but they see value in this process. And we get together 30 minutes before the consultant is there often to refresh whatever the questions are and the response. And then when the committee, or when the consultant comes in, then of course we have that similar questions go through, but we let the consultant lead that meeting. We probably, I'd say, get maybe 2 a month on average. But I think we've had firms in the past that have had those, they've been pretty successful afterwards. There's rarely a time that the firm leaves the meeting with no value coming to the meeting. Yeah, Eric. Number on debriefs. The question was, is there a number on number of debriefs that you can have? We allow 2 per calendar year. Thought I saw another hand go up. Yeah.
A lot about capacity, is there a kind of threshold for like, are the managers on a project? Won't go like
That's not necessarily a question for me, but the question was, is there a threshold on percent capacity, for example, for a project manager? Curious to see what, or do you want
Depends on the
to?
PM.
Yeah.
In my opinion. I mean, some PMs can handle that capacity, so.
Yeah, there's definitely not a set amount of, if you propose and they've got 75% booked, that we're gonna just say, no, we can't do this. Like Patrick said, some of it is knowing the individual, what other projects they may, what types of projects they have going on, how involved, complex they are.
Well, and having been a consultant, I remember when we were proposing on things, trying to do that 12 or 18 month capacity, reckon it's very hard to put that down. And so for me, capacity is, it comes also into like how much stuff do you have going on right now, and not necessarily just what percentage of hours are you available that you listed on the sheet.
over like your project. Have to fluctuate so much.
Right, I don't look at the numbers on that section very closely because I know that they're hard, it's too precise to be accurate.
If the project manager seems to finish it well on the project manager, a lot of times we'll team them with like a senior project manager and a junior project manager that try to show that obviously there's support there.
Right.
And you look at that difference, like the co-manager you were talking about.
I think as long as, for me, I'll say, and the question was, talking about the co-project managers, or if there's a concern about capacity to have a senior project manager and then kind of a deputy project manager or a junior project manager. I think the important thing for a lot of the KYTC project managers is that single point of contact. And then showing that, if there is a concern, that you have been able to mitigate that concern by doing these and these things. Like, I think it's great to list that and to say that even, put a giant arrow next to their name and say, if this person is too busy, this person's going to be supporting them. That way we don't even have to guess about it. And you've told us exactly what you think. You've told us what your plan is. Thank you. I was gonna go with a way different circular logic there.
Okay, I think we're at time. We did have a question that came in on the chat. I saw Michael Shaw from my office asked,
It's not.
where did Patrick Perry rent that cheap suit from?
It's not right.
You want to speak on the microphone?
Your closet.
Shaw, you set me up. Okay, well, thank you all. Appreciate your time today.